Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the last part of chapter 1-7, and we are wrapping up this lesson here on the back. We just finished number 1, so you should have that down from the last video. And let's roll on into number 2, which is a little bit more tricky than the last question. We have Bob, who spent 5 more than 3 times what Anna spent, and the directions remain the same as the last one. We're going to make the table, we're going to list the domain and the range. So let's finish this table here. Here's what we know, that Bob, remember, if I write it down, you write it down, please. Bob spent 5 more than, so I know that it's plus 5, right? And we know that Anna, I'll just put Ann because I'm going to have to squeeze that in, 3 times what Ann spent. He did 5 more than that, so it's Ann times 3 plus 5, right? Let's look at those words and make sure you understand what this means. Bob spent 5 more than, okay, so there's the plus sign right there, 5 more than 3 times what Ann spent. So here's the 3 times, right? 3 times Ann, 5 more than that. So we can take this, and to make our life a little bit easier, write it like this. B is equal to 3A, that means 3 times A, 3 times Ann, plus 5. Okay, so here in the chart, our X column represents how much Anna spent. And first she spent 2. So we have to figure out, well, how much did Bob spend if Anna spent 2? So we go 3 times, and we substitute. For Anna, we put in 2. 3 times 2 plus 5. We work that out, we get 6 plus 5, and that's 11. So if Anna spends $2, Bob spends 11. And we do the same thing for 4. Now to help you see what I'm doing here, in case I'm going too fast, and remember you hit pause if I do. Okay, we'll do the second one for $4. I'm doing this one now. Notice the color coding. If Anna spends $4, Bob spends 3 times Anna, which is 4, plus 5. And that would be 12 plus 5, which is 17, which goes there. And you would basically do the same thing for 6 and 7. If you're at home and trying to do this, you might hit pause and do that, because I'm just going to write the answer down here in a second. And for $6 it should be 23, and for $8 it should be 29. Now we need to finish this question because there's 2 more parts here. Always read all the directions. And the first part is to list the domain. Remember, domain are the X values. 2, 4, 6, 8. The X values that we used in our table. And range, those are the Y values. That would be 11, 17, 23, 29. It's the domain and the range in that problem. Okay, so that's a trickier one. Review that if necessary for you. And let's wrap up our notes here with number 3 as we look at words, a table, and a graph all together in one here. The representation here, the words, is right here. They tell us there's 16 ounces in 1 pound. So we're going to take that information and create a table of the various number of ounces that you get with these number of pounds. Well, let's start with A, the symbols. Well, we know that the number of ounces, so write it like this, is equal to, all right, the number of pounds times 16, right? If you have one pound, you have 16 ounces. You'd have 1 times 16. If you have 2 pounds, right, you have 16 times 2, 32, right? So let's call ounces Y, and we'll just call pounds X. Okay, so that means that Y is equal to 16 times X. So it asks you to complete the table. I need to give myself a little space here. It says, so that's A, that's the equation right there. Right, this part right here. So that's the actual answer to part A. It's right there. Y is equal to 16 times X, where Y is ounces and pounds is X. Then letter B says make a table to show those values. Okay, so we want our table to look like this. Ready? Write this down. Pounds. We're going to make a table of pounds and a table of ounces. All right, well, let's just use the numbers that they gave us for our table. We could start at 1 and list them all, but that would take a while. Let's just use what they gave. They have 5 pounds 8 pounds, 11 pounds, and 13 pounds. So we want to know if I have 5 pounds, how many ounces is that? Well, according to our equation, you multiply pounds times 16. So if you take 5 times 16, I figured that out for you, that's 80. And if you do the same thing for 8 pounds, take 8 times 16. Again, I'm just getting this information from that equation that we wrote a minute ago. 8 times 16, 128. And then if we did the same thing, if we multiplied 11 times 16, we'd get 176. And if we did the same thing for 13, we'd get 208. Now here comes an important part. Now what we want to do is we want to look at our data. The pounds, this is going to be pounds, the x. This is the x-axis. And this is going to be the number of ounces. That's the y-axis. So we need to label, we need to count here so that we can fit all of this on the x, all of the domain on the x. So I have to be able to get to 13. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count by 2's. Each line is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. Now, the ounces, that's a little bit trickier because I've got to try to get the 208. So I figured out if I count by 20s, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180, 200 will be at the top, which will put this one slightly off the graph, and I'm okay with that because I think it gets too thin if we count by any more. So what we're now going to do is we're going to plot these points where 5 pounds is 80 ounces. Okay, that's an ordered pair that looks like this, 5, 80. So we're going to go over to where 5 would be, 2, 4. 5 would be halfway between 4 and 6, right? It's brilliant, isn't it? Then we're going to count up to 80, 20, 40, 60, 80, put a dot. We're doing line graphs here. We're not doing a bar graph because this data, it's called continuous data, and we won't talk about that anymore at this point. But then this next order pair right here, for 8 pounds, you have 128. So go over to 8 and count up to where, well, it would be slightly over. That's 120, that's 140. 130 would be right in the middle, so it's going to be just slightly under the middle there. Just eyeball that as best you can. The next one, 11, 176. Again, there's 10, there's 12, so 11 would be in between. Go up to about, there's 160, there's 180. So again, 170 would be in the middle, so it'd be a little above the middle right there. And then the last one, 13, which is in between, that's going to be slightly over the 200. Like I said, it just goes slightly off the graph. And there you have a graph. Now what you should do is take your pencil. I can cheat because I have this smart stuff. And you should be able to connect those points into a line. If we did it perfectly, it actually would line up like that. And you have the graph that represents that table that we got from that equation. So there you have, again, 4 ways to show information through an equation, through words, through a table, and through a graph. So hopefully that's making sense to you. And bring your questions to class. We'll talk soon.